Ladies and gentlemen, it is time that we go ahead and talk about one of the most beloved hand cannons in Destiny 2's history. You know it, you love it, Callus loves it. Straight from the Leviathan, back from the dead, we have the return of the Midnight Coup. This is a kinetic 140 hand cannon that used to run rampant as the main weapon people used way back during the first year of this game with the OG role of Outlaw and Rampage. Although these days we all know that ain't gonna cut it anymore. Luckily, this weapon's new perk pool has quite the amount of stuff to offer to you, and it could very well replace your Fatebringer. That's a video for a different day. Now, do bear in mind that these days we live in an era where if you're gonna use a primary weapon, you're generally gonna want to use it in your energy slot for all types of reasons. Look at Sunshot and Zally's Bane this season, for example. So with a kinetic primary, you're not gonna be able to do stuff like that. You're not gonna be able to extend your resto, you're not gonna be able to get any jolt, any volatile, no unravel, no freezing, nothing like that. So it's gonna have to be bringing a lot to the table for you to consider using it. Of course, this thing isn't gonna be able to fill the niche like Warden's Law can for a kinetic, a legendary primary weapon form of really good damage with Lucky Pants. That's mainly due to Warden's Law's frame. However, because this weapon is a hand cannon and hand cannons are in such a great spot, it is gonna feel really good and it's gonna be pretty darn good. If you like your Fatebringer, you'll like this one. Now, if we pull up the weapons perk pool, you'll see there is some juice. Of course, at the very top of it, you have Outlaw and Rampage, the OG God roll, but you got some really good stuff in the third column like Firefly, Shoot Salute, and Explosive Payload. You also have Enlightened Action, but are you really going to pass up something like Explosive Payload or Firefly? I don't think you are. Me personally, my favorite two perks out of this column, easily Explosive Payload and Firefly. Keep in mind that Firefly does grant you 50 reload speed for 6 seconds whenever you get a precision kill. Very useful. And Explosive Payload is just going to give you a nice little 15% damage increase, which we'll happily take. You can never go wrong with Explosive Payload on a hand cannon. Now, where things get a little bit spicy, even more so rather, is the fourth column. So what's going to jump out immediately, of course, is going to be something like Kinetic Tremors. And before this weapon came out, a lot of people thought that Explosive Payload might help trigger Kinetic Tremors because it technically hits twice. And since Kinetic Tremors takes 6 shots on a hand cannon to proc, people were thinking that maybe with Explosive Payload, it would bring that down to 3. Well, let me tell you, it does not. Which does kind of stink because in most content, you're not even going to have an enemy survive 6 shots from a kinetic hand cannon, especially if you have Explosive Payload on it. So while I still think Kinetic Tremors is really, really good, I don't think it's going to be as good on this weapon like it is on something like the Supremacy, for example. It can still do you some justice, but it's not as amazing like it normally is. So some of the other options in this fourth column, ideally something like One for All or Frenzy, is might going to do you a little bit more justice and flat out be better in most scenarios. For example, One for All will give you a 35% damage buff for 10 seconds whenever you damage 3 separate enemies. And if you have Explosive Payload in the first column, that's gonna proc without you even knowing at times, and it's just gonna be very useful. Do not sleep on One for All on this weapon, especially with Explosive Payload. And then we have the Fatebringer roll to round it out with Frenzy. So you could do Explosive Payload, Frenzy, if you really want to flat out replace your Fatebringer, or if you don't have a Fatebringer. Frenzy will be a 15% damage buff. It'll max out your handling and your reload speed, and overall will be very, very good, especially with Explosive Payload. So let me know which double damage roll for this bad boy you're thinking of going for. Of course, Firefly is still going to be nasty, but I think most people definitely want to go for that double damage roll. Let me know your thoughts on that. And of course, we cannot forget the weapon's origin trait that all of the Brave Arsenal weapons have, Indomitability. If you are on a light subclass, you'll get 5% grenade energy with each kill on this weapon. If you're on a dark subclass, you'll get 5% melee energy. So in an era where energy primary weapons are generally the way to go if you're going to use a primary weapon, the Midnight Coup can definitely put up a really good fight and definitely feels really good when you're using it. And if you are going to use any kinetic primary in the game, a hand cannon is generally going to be the best way to go about it. Of course, we're talking non-exotic here. In the Midnight Coup, might just be your best option to go for. If you don't have a Fatebringer, definitely go for this bad boy, as it'll be really darn good. We just currently live in a meta where kinetic primaries don't have nearly as much synergy as energy primaries. I would say God rolls to go for would be Explosive Payload with either Frenzy, One for All, or Kinetic Tremors. And I think the sleeper best pick is Explosive Payload and One for All, man. One for All will be really easy to proc, and your hand cannon will be doing 50% more damage than a base version of it with that roll, and One for overall as Proc. Not too shabby. And then other good roles would be something like Firefly with any of those other 3 perks from the 4th column. Thank you so much for watching the video. You guys be safe, take care, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. Peace out.